please. And no minimizing.
Sure, so I talked to her.
Right, oh yeah. It's like, it's dusk and then it's pitch black. All right, folks, I'll go ahead and call to order our November 2024 meeting of the Davis Police Accountability Commission. I'll go, I guess, from the opposite end with roll call. Commissioner Canning? Here. Commissioner Wilson? Here. Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Bliss?
Here.
We heard previously that Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald was not going to be with us this evening, and I think we're still waiting on Vice Chair Griswold, and Commissioner Horton and myself is here. We'll go ahead and move to approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to make a motion for approval of this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this evening's agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, excuse me. Any opposition? All right, agenda approved. Brief announcements from city staff. Kelly.
All right, so first announcement is there is an election tomorrow, so if you haven't voted, go vote. It's my public service announcement. The second is at the last meeting, Commissioner Canning had asked a question about, or for an update on the surveillance technology recommendations and work that you guys had talked about and done last spring. And so I'm starting off with a mea culpa. I went back and dug into things because in my head that had all been finished and we had moved on and I hadn't thought about it. When I looked into what the notes and the minutes and the et cetera, what I could find, I believe the subcommittee had had conversations individually offline with individual council members, but the memo never, I don't have any record of it officially going to the council.
Okay.
So that said, we need to go back and go ahead and update the webpage. That was one of the requests that the commission had. That doesn't require council approval, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then you had some very specific requests in terms of potential amendments to the surveillance technology ordinance itself, which did not come forward when the council approved the ordinance, or the renewal, sorry, in June of this past year. So I will work with Chief Henry on incorporating those recommendations going forward. So I apologize. As I said, it was out of sight, out of mind, and I'm glad you brought it up because when I looked, it hadn't been done.
Thank you.
So I don't have any other announcements myself. I don't know if Councilmember Petita does or not.
Any commissioner announcements? I'll sort of take my traditional opportunity to point out a couple of monthly observances. As someone who works for a foster care advocacy agency, CASA of Solano County, I want to, I'm glad to point out, I guess, that it's National Adoption Month here in the month of November. Also, as someone who lost my mother to lung cancer, it's Lung Cancer Awareness Month. I know the City Council, I believe, usually does a proclamation recognizing this as well. I remember when I believe Councilmember Neville was the person who presented the proclamation last year, and she brought up how, early screening, as I certainly know with my mother's experience, can really be a pivotal factor there. I think they recommend that you begin getting those screenings after you turn 50. As someone who lost my mother at the age of 49, I think you maybe should probably get those a little bit earlier. It's also, I think as many other folks are aware, Native American Heritage Month here in the month of November. And so we know that the city government and other sort of local institutions make efforts to do native land acknowledgements, and I think that's an important a part of what folks do in the community. But of course, here in the Police Accountability Commission, I think it's important to understand and be cognizant of the really high rates of interaction with the law enforcement system that folks who are Native American can have and have had historically, and it's something that though of course in many parts of the United States there are small Native American populations, there are many people of Native ancestry who are in our community, and so we should be cognizant of that, I think, as we are engaging in our policymaking here. Any further commissioner announcements? Moving to public comment or general public comment. So this would be on things that are not on our agenda, or if there are items, excuse me, that are on our agenda that you don't believe you can stay for, this would be the time to address the commission on those. Any general public comment? All right. We can move to our very lengthy consent calendar. Does anyone want to make a motion for the approval of our October 7th, 2024 minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on approving the October minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes approved. The police auditor update. Of course, we are always glad to have Mike and Stephen here representing our police auditors. But usually we're representing or seeing them represented in rectangles on the screen. We're glad to see them in person, making the treacherous journey from down south. So take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Chair Horton. Good to see everyone in person. It's always good to get out of the Zoom world, the Teams world, and to actually have an opportunity to see people in the flesh. We are, my colleague Steve and I are here, and obviously came in conjunction with your meeting so that we could be here this evening. But we also had a chance earlier today to meet with the city manager, meet with Kelly, as well as meet with your new chief of police, who we had met before, but not in his new capacity as chief. We went over some issues. We got sort of his thoughts about how things may evolve or change or stay the same regarding the leadership in the police department, and it was a good conversation. We focused also on some things that we wanted to talk about to improve our protocols in the way in which we receive information from the police department. And the idea and the concept was to figure out a way where we could get investigations when they're completed on a more timely basis, rather than having them at the end of the calendar year come to us all at once. With the idea of that would be more efficient. It would also provide us an opportunity to report back in a more timely manner to you and your community about our evaluation, our assessment of those investigations. And Chief Henry was agreeable to that change. So I think you'll be seeing us reporting more regularly and in a more timely basis the cases that are ongoing and being investigated by the police department involving both internal and external complaints. And I think that I know that you'll find next time we're here, you'll see a report of ongoing cases that you haven't seen in a while. And in fact, we have had three, Steve?
Yes.
3 cases that we've actually entered into the system very recently, and not as recently so that they're not on this month's flow chart, but they will be next month. And they all involve varied complaints about conduct of the police department. We've sent them on to Chief Henry, to the lieutenant entrusted with professional standards in the department. We had a chance to briefly meet with the lieutenant who has that responsibility in the department. And so you'll see, you won't get a report back, but you'll see on our log those new entries, as well as any other entries that are ongoing that we weren't aware of. And I think we'll be happier to have a more timely report back on those cases. The other thing, in addition to all kinds of things that we talked about with the chief, We also talked about potential topics for our next audit. As you know, we have the ability to conduct systemic audits in addition to our complaint investigation reviews, and suggested some things to him, asked him to provide any ideas he might have. And we would make that same entreaty to this body as well, with regard to what you think we might want to be looking at systemically. And as you recall, we have done audits in the past. We did a use of force audit. We did an audit looking at the way in which mental health calls were responded to by the police department. And we also did most recently the recruiting and hiring audit. So it's time for another audit. And if you all have any thoughts, I know that's not on today's agenda, but you may want to think about agendizing that and providing more formal thoughts for us in any future meetings. I think that's pretty much an update. But Steve, did you have anything else that I missed?
I think that captures it. Good evening, everybody, and as Mike said, it's very nice to be back here with you in person. I will just say that I think one of the advantages for us of having Chief Henry get chosen for the position is that we have had some dealings with him already. We are familiar with him and are pleased to be able to say we have found him to be very responsive and communicative and collaborative, so we are enthusiastic about some of the items that Mike mentioned and just kind of the potential to be engaging in some evolving ways that I think will be positive for us and hopefully for your commission as well. So thank you.
And while I have the floor, although it's really more pertaining to the later agenda item on the review of our office, of our work, we have recently picked up a responsibility for auditing the City of Eureka's police department. And they have a similar provision in which their police accountability group has to do a review of us. And so they said, do you have any go-bys where we could look at and see where other commissions have evaluated or reviewed your work? And we said, well, there's Davis. And so I think they took the Davis report, reports that you've done in the past, and I think they changed a couple of words, but I think it looks a lot like the Davis review. And to your credit, you were ahead of them with regard to that responsibility. That's all I have, but it's certainly available for any questions.
Any more questions? So I think, it's great that the theme of your report today sort of dovetails with our later agenda items. I think you sort of indicated that you had when y'all met with Chief Henry, that, these are a couple of things that we could do to sort of improve our processes and communication. Did you get an indication from Chief Henry as, hey, these are a couple of things that I'm thinking about, organic to himself in terms of different things that he's looking to do in the department?
We certainly had a wide-ranging discussion on those topics, yeah, it covered all that territory. I don't think you would be surprised or shocked by anything new. I don't think that anything's going to get blown up figuratively or literally with regard to the agency. But I do think that obviously he brings a different personality to the table. And I think he also is looking forward to the give and take that you all may have hopefully next month, if he can clear his calendar.
We'll do it next week too, Any other questions? Yes.
I just thought of one. Did you happen to bring up the past recommendations from prior audits? The fact was we wanted to get an ongoing thing of their responses to your recommendations, and we had one time we got one and we wanted more information as to why he just said no. Did that come up from you, or do we need to bring that up ourselves?
It didn't come up, but we will put that on our next discussion item the next time we have a chance to talk with him.
I was gonna bring this up when we appointed the subcommittee, later on in the agenda, because you sort of circled over to there, and then also you brought up, just sort of the audits in general. I wanted to, I was very grateful I think it was the second, IPA review, Mike, that you brought up, hey, there's this sort of untapped bit of the relationship in terms of the audits that, we haven't explored yet in between the PAC and the auditor. Maybe we should do that. I'm glad you brought that up in that audit process. I believe, like I said, the second time that we did the review. And so I'm wondering, or I'm hoping that as we get into this next review, that all of us, collectively, the commission and you and Stephen, can think about ways that we can sort of step up the PAC relationship and, fully utilize, this commission's authorizing resolution, the document that the council sort of passed in sort of setting up your role. And so, figuring out what we can do to sort of take the partnership up to the next level. I'm wondering how we can step that up. Which is more just sort of a comment than a question. Anything else? Public comment on our IPA report? Anything further from the commission? All right, off to our item, thank you, Mike and Stephen. Off to our next item, 7A, which was thankfully brought up by Commissioner Bliss at the last meeting, a recognition of the outgoing chief, Chief Pytel, for his time of service. My understanding, just sort of, recapping from the conversation, Kelly brought up that I believe that there's maybe a council recognition that's coming up sometime, and and we can include comments or recognition that the Police Accountability Commission wants to include in that. Now, if we want that to be a part of the city's sort of rhetorical recognition of the chief. Any comments on sort of how we want to handle that and thoughts?
Well, I just was thinking we want to thank him for his service and, his time that he spent at this community. I think our police department holds up well against any in the state. And with his long history here, I think we have to give him credit because he would certainly have to take the blame if it didn't. And I think we should give him credit for where we land today and what he's done over time, so.
I'm thinking that we have to draft not a super long, but at least a one sentence sort of statement. Does that seem like that makes sense, Kelly or council member?
So if the commission decides you want to do something, you've got a couple of different options. You could draft something in writing that one of you could come and present on the 19th of November. That's the council meeting that will be doing the acknowledgements for outgoing Chief Pytel, and then doing a ceremonial swearing in for Chief Henry. So I'm used to that. You could, if you didn't want to write something, you could simply appoint somebody from the commission to come and say some comments on behalf of the commission during that particular item. We will have there will be several different entities there with their versions of proclamations or resolutions or those kinds of things. If there's something else that you prefer to do, it's really up to you.
Thoughts, Commissioner King?
I just think that having one of us go and give the appreciation of the commission is enough. I don't know if we need to do anything in writing.
Other thoughts?
Are you volunteering?
As tribute?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
So November the 19th, our ambassador from the commission.
Well, I'm thinking maybe I appreciate your comment. It made me think something very brief, but in writing, might be a press release on behalf of the PAC. Something to the effect that when we look at the relationship between the police and the community in Davis during the life of this commission, we have had a few celebrated incidents, very few, but we have had just a few over the past 6 or 7 years. And they've all been resolved with a relatively minor amount of risk or violence. I'm not really doing well with my vocabulary on this, but I just get a sense that we have had a pretty calm period overall of police, where the police activity has been routine. It has been as expected. I don't think we've had any serious issues. Mike and Steve can maybe refresh my memory on some of this, but I think things have gone quite well all during the life of this commission, and the department under the chief's direction has responded to the challenge that we had around the period of launching this commission and in the year or so preceding it. So we should be able to put something brief, a couple of paragraphs maybe, that could be, as I say, a press release expressing our appreciation for his service in that regard.
So I spiritually kind of would prefer something that is written, but at the same time I recognize that the more words we try to, make a part of that, I think the wordsmithing, in terms of creating something that's going to be unifying across this entire commission and going to fully represent, I think, all this commission is going to sort of strain. And so while I would kind of prefer something that was written down, just knowing the complication of all of that, I'm kind of more leaning toward what Robert said earlier, just having sort of one of us verbally represent the commission and express or acknowledge, outgoing Chief Pytel and his years of service as Commissioner Bliss sort of spoke about just a second ago. But Commissioner Bliss.
One thing we could do, Robert, what do you think, is tie his service to our audits.
Mhm.
We had the, what was the first one, the 8 can't wait, plus the no-knock,
Use
Audit.
of force.
and then we had the mental health one. And in both cases, our department showed off very well. And we could tie our gratitude to that, where we looked at community issues and found that under his leadership, they were there.
Right. His responsiveness to the commission's requests and our,
Well, and the results.
yeah,
The
and the results showed
were-
very well about his management of the police and.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
Davis.
that would tie into who we are and
Yeah.
what we've looked at, if that works.
I'd be glad to put together a couple paragraphs and circulate them. Kelly?
If you want to appoint a subcommittee to circulate the ones, you can do that. Or if the commission trusts Commissioner Canyon to come up with something and bring it forward on the 19th, you can authorize him to do that, whichever you want.
There's just a really narrow or short runway between now and the 19th, and so I hesitate to sort of task a subcommittee with with doing that. I trust, at least I, well, speaking for me, trust that you can, represent the commission.
I'll come up with something.
And I trust you too, but if you want another pair of eyes on it, I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Mary.
Other thoughts on this? Public comment on this item? Anything further from the commission? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just confused on how it was left. I think it's fine if you want to go and say something, but I got confused if you were writing something and then the forum, it was discussed that there'd be, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a press conference.
No.
So I got confused about this idea of writing.
To clarify, at least.
Right, I mean, I'm gonna read.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's gonna prepare something
Very
to
well.
read,
That makes sense to me.
on the 19th.
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Anything further from the commission on this? All right. Taking us to item 7B-A, which is communications and interactions with the police department overall, but I think more specifically the police department leadership. So since this one is on the agenda at my urging, I'll take the lead here. I think that if I'm reflecting on the conversations that we've had, even really just in the past couple of months about, hey, we haven't, had the chief here in a while, or we haven't had someone from the department here in a while, how, do we want to, manage that is sort of, a recurring concern in terms of our relationship with the department. And I think as I described to Vice Chair Griswold and Kelly, Kelly the other day as we were sort of formulating the agenda, I feel like we sort of inadvertently got off into not the best foot in terms of our just interaction between police leadership and the PAC. I think we had a number of discussions in our first couple of months as a commission, excuse me, about wanting to be sensitive to whether or not folks in the community would feel comfortable giving public comment in a room where there was uniformed police officers present. I think, in the game of telephone that I think a lot of us played in elementary school, I think that got miscommunicated as it made its way back to the department, and it sort of became, hey, we kind of don't want y'all here, I think was what was received. And I know, at least from my part, that wasn't what the intent was. I think it was, as I just described a second ago, we wanted to thoughtfully manage, knowing that there would be people in the community who would want to give public comment and engage with the discussions of this commission, but might feel less comfortable doing so in a forthcoming fashion with uniformed police personnel in the room. And so, all that being said, I'm looking forward to the opportunity that having a new chief presents to hopefully get off onto a better foot, I think, into what is not necessarily like an open door, but a more sort of less you have to have an engraved invitation from the PAC to come to the Police Accountability Commission. Of course, we still do want to hold to what I think the commission wanted to hold to in our first couple of months in 2019, that we do want to be sensitive to the fact that there are people in the public who are going to want to come here, or who are maybe less comfortable doing that with a police presence there. Of course, I'm not saying that this is this is not an advocacy for the incoming or the new chief or police period to be at all of the Police Accountability Commission meetings. But I think that there is a way for us to have a more open interaction and relationship with the chief going forward. And I just wanted, particularly before the chief came next month, for us to have a little bit of a discussion about that, and just to, I know those are all of my thoughts about that, particularly having served here since we were all appointed thousands of years ago. But I'm interested to hear what other folks think about, just in terms of having the chief here, having department personnel here. We had, I believe, Lieutenant Waltz here, also thousands of years ago, to describe the police training process. And so we've had other police personnel. We've had the deputy chief, I think, here perhaps once. No?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, thoughts on this, Commissioner Sherman?
Thank you. I feel, and I hope, I expect that you'll all agree with me, that what we would like to see going forward is an ongoing conversation. And we'll be having the first conversation with him next month. And in that conversation, I would like to ask Chief Henry how he feels about his relationship with the commission, what he expects of us, and what he anticipates of us. And then, of course, we can express our ideas about ours from the point of view of our side of the relationship. But I think it would be a very good, encouraging activity right at the very beginning of his term, for him to hear from us how we feel about a number of things, and for us to hear from him. So I feel that there are questions that I, and I'm sure others of the commission, would like to ask, and we don't really need to anticipate what the responses are going to be, or any particular preparation for that, except to maybe all of us be thinking about questions that we would like to ask him, and be prepared, so that we have perhaps not a formal agenda, but at least an environment of inquiry and getting to know you kind of situation to start with. And one of the things that I would propose to him, as I have in the past, is that we have a more frequent and at least somewhat regular schedule, 3-4 times a year or whatever it might be, where we can anticipate and save up questions for it, and be able to let the community know that our sessions with the chief will be taking place in this chamber, and of course the public will be welcome to participate.
Yeah, I think there's a couple opportunities during the year to have the chief come and talk to us. You know, we have certain responsibilities, surveillance and military items. They might provide a forum for us to have discussions with him that go beyond simply that. I think it would be good to have him come several times a year, say quarterly, once a quarter, and to sort of make it known that's when the chief comes and talks to us. I've always been curious, to be frank, about why our staff liaison is Kelly, as opposed to somebody from the police department. Nothing about Kelly's speaking on behalf of the police department, but I mean, it would be a different sort of meeting if the chief or a lieutenant or somebody was sitting behind the table there, but I think that we ought to formalize, if the chief is willing and interested, you know, in a more regular appearance here.
Yeah, I do think that Kelly has regularly lamented not having, technical police expertise to offer, and has to take the questions back to the department. And so I think, particularly in those moments where we are reviewing, the long guns, the military equipment, the surveillance technology, having in those meetings in particular, having the chief or a representative from the department there could be helpful in a technical sense. Commissioner Wilson?
So being new, we don't know a lot of the history. Why is there not a representative? I mean, was that, when this commission was established, was that never a plan?
In terms of permanently at the meetings?
Yeah, I mean, why there isn't a representative from the department?
So it was set up that way by design.
By whom?
Our learned counsel.
Well, the council and folks who are advocating for this commission to exist. And the concern was absolutely that if law enforcement were present, it would dampen things, or maybe some people wouldn't come and participate. I think that was when the thought was that the commission would be more of a public forum for people to address their concerns. And what the commission, I mean, certainly people are welcome and encouraged to do that. But I feel that what the commission has evolved into is one that is looking more at, policy recommendations to make to council, et cetera. And so, to your points earlier, I'm not, they won't give me a badge. I'm not the technical or the operational expert on how things, work in the police department. I'm not the legal expert. We're fortunate that we have the auditor representatives at each meeting who are able to provide some of that, but they're also not the, they can't answer always very specific questions about how Davis PD does particular things. So I think it's a reasonable question to ask you, what is the overall purpose of the commission, and are you getting the right expertise that you need at each commission meeting?
Again, so the environment is different now than it was initially, as I kind of understand, right, when this commission was organized. And I'm just curious, again, with the concern about there being someone in uniform maybe inhibiting conversation, is that something that we know or something that we assumed? Because again, I remember I wasn't here at that point in time, so I don't know exactly the history at that point.
So I'll just say quickly before Councilmember Partita comments that there was, not that you were going to say anything different, but just, we did have people report at the time that they would feel less comfortable doing that. So I don't know if there was a pie chart with, data necessarily that proved that out, but there were certainly people who reported that. And I just will say, briefly that I'm very comfortable with Kelly being our staff liaison, and that our staff liaison not necessarily be a police department personnel individual, but I do kind of recognize what Commissioner Canning though brought up is that it would be helpful at certain times, as it is for the city council. Like, the city council doesn't have to have Mike, the other Mike, our city manager, be a police officer. They just can have someone from the department come to certain meetings where that expertise would be necessary. Councilmember Partita.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add on to that. Yes, I do think that when we started this commission, the intention was there to be a bright line sort of between this commission and the police department. And it was when we were having a lot of conversations around sort of separating out what it was that the police did and what, sort of duties that other people would have, so that we could separate those two things. And because we did intend for people to come in here and talk about maybe grievances that they had, and that it would be difficult to do that if there was a representative here from the department. I do also remember that we did want to have a more regular check-in, and I think this speaks to, the item that we're talking about right now, because we can't exist in a vacuum. Obviously, we need to have that connection, and part of forming this commission also was to sort of repair that relationship that existed I don't know, I mean, certainly it existed here in Davis, but more so, I think, nationally. There was, that period in time where there was a lot of mistrust and a lot of bad relation between the police departments and the community. And in order to sort of build those bridges and to have a better relationship between the community and the police department, that was part of what this commission is also tasked with. And I think that the feeling was that if you hold your police department accountable, it makes that relationship easier to have. And I do think we've moved in the right direction. It doesn't mean that we still don't need a safe space for people who have had bad experiences with the police department to come to. And so I think having those conversations with the police department in this space
and announcing ahead of time so that people know that this is gonna be a meeting where there are police. That was sort of how we set this up, so that it would be a safe space. It would be a space that we build that trust, and that, we give people an opportunity to come.
And I think it's maybe also important to mention that, what also came up during that sort of period of time, 2017, 2018, is that there were also people who, just as much as they, were concerned about having a permanent police presence at Police Accountability Commission meetings, did want some opportunities to, I think perhaps as they would have conceptualized it, hold themselves, police accountable with some of these exchanges. And so, I think this is maybe a good point for me to bring up, that I think that one of the things I hoped was going to happen in our relationship with the chief originally, or with the department overall, that didn't happen, and I'm hoping can happen now in this new sort of era of the relationship, is that similar to, council sort of consulting with us in terms of our responsibilities of police accountability, that I'm hoping that it's not just we ask the chief or we ask the department to come here. I'm hoping that if the department is working on something driving toward transparency or accountability, that they're going to say, hey, Pat, do you have some ideas on how we can engage in that in a way that, is driving forward that principle? And so I'm hoping that, when I said in the beginning of this conversation that I'm hoping that there can be a more open door sort of aspect of the relationship, that's kind of a little bit what I mean, that there could be, that the door doesn't only go in one direction. Commissioner King?
Yeah, I think the recent police department strategic planning process is a good example where I didn't even know it was happening. I'm not sure this commission, we weren't consulted, we weren't asked for any input we might have. Based on the audits that we've done, our work with the police auditor, so I think that those kinds of conversations would be really good to have with the new chief. I'd like to understand what he thinks the boundaries of accountability are for the police and how he would like to interact with us. Because we may have some sense of it, but I don't know what his is, to be frank. It'd be nice to have it in open forum too.
And I know with regard to the strategic plan process, that they held two community sort of feedback sessions. And I remember talking with Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald, but prior to those happening, it's like, oh shoot, I'm going to try to make one of them, but I wasn't able to make either one. And so yeah, having a more sort of formalized engagement on something like that, I think would be helpful. Commissioner Bliss?
Yeah, I agree with both Robert and Don, that I think it's important we ask what his perception is. He's been here a few meetings, he's been around, for us to listen to him first. But it's been one of my biggest disappointments since I've been on this commission, is that we haven't built a relationship. That was actually one of the reasons I wanted to be on it, was that we could be a resource both to them and them to us. And that hasn't been accomplished. One of the things we did try to do in the way back, we're going to remember it, we had the subcommittee, and it was, our first chair,
Commissioner McBride.
Myself, and one other person. We were to meet with Chief Pytel on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. We managed to get 1 or 2 meetings in before COVID came. And it was to be, remember, we agreed with him that it would be not put into a record, that he would talk openly and candidly with us, you remember that? And we only got 1 or 2 meetings in, and then that went away. So it's been one of my biggest disappointments, and I agree, and I'd like to kind of, number one, after we do ask questions, put those recommendations from the audit question in there. But I'd like to know how he would view us versus the chief's advisory committee that he has. Because I think the advisory committee is wonderful, but it is a reason not to have to ask us anything.
And,
and as far as what we're hearing, so.
and Commissioner Wilson, you served on that, right? Okay, yeah, so you can, you can give us some insights on that, how that functions.
Yeah, that's been thought.
Commissioner Sherman?
Well, we have an opportunity next month to ask how he feels about these ideas, and let him tell us what would be comfortable for him. And I agree with Commissioner Bliss. I think that there is a fantastic opportunity for us at this point to get off to a good start with him and not be concerned really with some of the disappointments. Well, you know, I think we all share a feeling of satisfaction generally with what our commission has been able to accomplish since its founding and ongoing. But at the same time, there's room for improvement in the relationship between ourselves and the police department, and thus with the community. A greater fulfillment of what might be the community's expectations of this commission. And they might be somewhat different than we assume them to be, and they might be somewhat different from what they were before COVID. You know, this is a fluid situation, always changing. I would also like to make a comment, if I could take another few seconds, on the subject that has come up. From time to time, it keeps coming up in this commission, and I find myself quite irritated by it, so I'll share my feelings with you if you can allow me the courtesy of a few extra seconds here. We keep hearing that people won't attend our meetings if there are police in attendance. And how many people are attending our meetings with the police not in attendance? Let's ask ourselves that. So, are we really, gambling on something that is of value? And we, on the other side of that coin, is missing an opportunity to hear from more people, being more open about the whole thing. And and from what little we know at this point about Commissioner Henry, and certainly, Mike, you can advise us on this, having had a conference with him. I think he is probably quite open to us at this point and interested in a productive relationship that will also involve the public in Davis. So I think we're headed towards a good beginning with him, with these ideas of a conversation, an exchange, listening to him, letting him help him develop a feeling that we are positive, we want to be helpful, and we stand as between the police department and the community as an opportunity for communication and for engendering the concept of our police as guardians and service, which is, I'm sure, what will interest him and what will interest the community.
Two other things I'll just mention here, and I imagine, have we done public comment yet? Okay, so yeah, we'll do that. One, I think one of the best things here in terms of, PAC department relations and department community relations is what a number of folks have referenced and Commissioner Sherman just referenced now, is that there's, it's a clean slate. If I'm being honest, and not to say that I don't join any of the acknowledgements of Chief Vitel's service and tenure here, but if I'm being 100% honest, I still have some, hard feelings about, the picnic day situation and a couple of other incidents and how the department handled those. And so the greatest thing about sort of the new chapter of the relationship is there's none of that history with Chief Henry. Now, of course, he's not a perfect person, so he's gonna make his fair share, but we don't have that same sort of background. And so I'm glad to just sort of move forward on what we think is, the most productive and best thing. One sort of almost incidental thing that I'll mention is something I've been trying to do since I've been on this commission, and we've been here for 6 years and still haven't been able to do it, is to do a ride-along. And of course, there was the pandemic in the middle of that, and so that really made that of course, had some impact on that. But even after the pandemic, I've tried, before the pandemic, I've tried. And so, that's kind of almost a thing that I kind of expected would be like a part of the onboarding process as a PAC member, that you have to kind of do a ride along with the Davis Police Department. And so, like, those kind of almost mundane, small things, I think can be a part of how we can, as I think a number of folks said, sort of develop a relationship and sort of, I think, have the folks in the department better understand what our mission is and what we're trying to do and what we're aiming at, and not misunderstand maybe from what might be in the media or sort of in other circulation about what we're trying to do, and then vice versa, right? Anyway, any other comments before we go to a question? Okay, public comment on this item. Any public comment on our overall relationship with the incoming chief and the department leadership? If not, any further comments, Commissioner Bliss?
Do we want questions submitted to him beforehand so that he has a chance to be prepared? Or are we wanting him to come here and just sort of free flow?
For the next meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's item B.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought we were doing the questions.
I just want to follow up on something you just said. Are there other commissioners who are interested in ride-alongs? Take care of that.
I have to say too, being on the community advisory board, we've had tours of the entire department, and I'm actually surprised that this hasn't happened, because I assumed, So I mean, not only just the ride-along, but I also think being able to go in and see where all the equipment is stored, and whatever that big truck is in the back, all of that.
Right, I think that, again, some of that information might seem kind of mundane, particularly maybe as a public defender, it's something you're dealing with all day, so you don't need any more of that. But for me, as, just again, try to be as honest as possible, as someone who's, really, none of my field interactions with law enforcement have been positive, right? And so being able to, in a non-tense, non-having my life at stake sort of situation, engage with some of our, officers and, sort of, be at the department headquarters, as you're talking about seeing kind of a tour of the facilities, again, the ride-alongs I think could be helpful in, because I think, so much of, some of my interns are in Paul 104, which is the California politics course, and one of the things that's covered there is the professionalization of the California state legislature, and one of the biggest parts of that is just them getting more information. Them being able to do a better job on behalf of their constituents, with them having more independent staff, with them having more informational resources that weren't a part of the interest groups that were feeding, obviously, information that had a slant to it. And so I think what we can do to make sure that the commission has more and varied information resources and channels, I think can make us a better functioning and more effective commission. Any further comments? All right. Moving on to, as Commissioner Bliss led into a second ago, item BB, which is an interesting lettering. And so this would be a good opportunity if folks want to have, I think it's folks who've been on the commission for a while, remember it's a more productive conversation if whoever's sitting at the table, has a little bit of an understanding as to what questions we're going to ask, what topics we're going to, maybe bring up and want them to respond to. So if there was something particularly on your mind that you wanted the chief to be, better prepared to be responsive to, this would be a good chance to get that on the table now, and we can send that over to the chief, Kelly.
And regardless, I will make sure that the conversation that you just had, which I think has great bearing on what he comes and talks to you about next meeting. I'll make sure that he has a recap of that, so if nothing else, he'll have that.
Very good.
Anything beyond the last conversation that we want to either share with, ask the chief, Commissioner Cannon?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious about his thoughts about hiring, efforts he may have to hire support staff, new dispatchers, anything that might, is he fully staffed? He's not fully staffed, is he? No.
No.
And what the outlook is from his standpoint, and what efforts he might be thinking about to hire the right people to police in Davis.
So, and this might be sort of leading off from that, I don't know if we, but there was a sort of police analyst sort of role that was a part of the Time for the 9 recommendations, and I sort of lost track of if that happened. I know that obviously with so many of those things, funding is a thing, so I don't know if that's a thing to include in the questions there. But just sort of expanding, for folks who have not been studying all of these issues for the past couple of years. This was to look into what the reasonings were for the racial disparities in policing, particularly in Davis. And so, there's this RIPA data that we get every year, and we're supposed to be doing something educated with, but we're sort of inhibited from doing that because we don't have the person in this role to be able to take a look at this information and do something forward thinking with it. Other questions? Oh, Commissioner Chairman?
Yeah, maybe we can turn to Mike and Steve here. It's so wonderful to have you here in person and actually being able to see your reactions to some of the comments that we make. You probably can give us some good ideas based on your experience and what you've seen in your other client markets. And my specific question to you would be, and there are subsets to it, but it would be, what opportunities do you feel that we are missing? You've had conversations, many dozens of conversations with us, and you've had now at least a good substantive conversation with Chief Henry, and you're working with their counterparts in your other client markets. So, share with us any ideas you might have that would help us anyway for next month's encounter.
Commissioner Sherman, thank you for that question. You're always supposed to say that while you're thinking of the answer.
Right.
So I think that, obviously when there's a change of leadership, as I think I said, touched upon in my earlier remarks, everyone's gonna bring their life experience to the table. Unlike your former chief, Chief Pytel, this chief did not grow up in your organization, did not grow up in this organization. So that may have an impact on how he decides to prioritize public safety initiatives. But I think if I were you all, that it would be those kinds of questions that I would want to ask. What is it, you've been in a role as deputy chief for 18 months. Prior to that, you had other law enforcement experience. And how are you going to meld that? What are your thoughts about leadership positions, promotion decisions? How are those going to work? Are they going to be any different than the way they have? What's your sense for the priorities with public safety in the city? What are you hearing in your new role as chief from the community about what those priorities should be? What is it that you would want your folks to be focusing on? Those are the kinds of questions that I think would be helpful, at least to start off the conversation. Then you can get into the weeds in an obvious, hopefully later discussion. But I think right now, since he's brand new in his position as chief, I'd want to know, where are you going to take this police department? What did you learn during the strategic planning process that is going to educate and inform what policing in Davis is going to look like in 2025 and beyond. But I think, to be fair, if in fact you intend to ask those kinds of questions, it would probably be helpful for the chief to know that's where you're going.
Yeah, I don't know, I assume you got some of those, Kelly, but I would definitely want to sort of emphasize if they're not there, the sort of, priority questions, I would definitely want to hear from him sort of what his thoughts are, kind of in two-part, what his specific priorities for himself are, sort of early priorities in that role, but also what he feels like, particularly leading off of the strategic planning process, what he feels like are the public safety priorities for the department. There's something else I was gonna say, but I lost it. Other things that folks want to include?
Yeah, I think the idea of him coming from a different background is really important, just to sort of get his sense. He comes from a more urban policing environment.
But then also the lottery, right?
Yeah, but
I just think that
I think that's transitional, but, I coming to a college town, very different environment, I'd just like to hear his thoughts about, are there things that he might want to change in how we police in Davis? I don't know. I mean, he's our window into police culture to a certain degree, and I think it's important for us to try to keep our finger on that if we can.
Which gets me back to what I had forgotten earlier that Mike brought up, because I definitely would want to hear sort of what his thoughts are about the factors of promotion, sort of the things that are going to get you promoted in the Davis Police Department, or if those are any things that are different from the past practice. Any other questions or topics that we
I
want to
think
bring up?
related to that, and we've dealt with it before in the same context, is the difficulties of finding good prospects to join the police department. The recruiting has become very difficult, and things have been changing, not necessarily for the better over the past year or so. I'm just referring to articles I've read about what's going on in some of the other cities in terms of recruitment and the attitudes within the police department. The whole basic concepts, the whole of basic concepts that we've been dealing with right along. So asking him how he feels about it and how he relates.
Yes, as the
Commissioner Canning points out, how Chief Henry relates his experiences to the challenges that he sees here. If we can just get him talking, frankly, while we're talking, we learn nothing. But if we can get him talking, I think we can really get a handle on how we can foster a productive relationship between the commission and the police department.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in his approach of being out in the community. I was in Mill Valley a couple of years ago and just having a cup of coffee, and the police chief was wandering around town, just introducing himself and talking with people. And it was really nice having that sense of community and sense. And I don't, maybe Davis isn't exactly a commuting town to walk around, but it would still be nice to see that kind of downtown commitment, because it shows a community commitment.
I think I shared this with Vice Chair Griswold and Kelly when we were making the agenda. I think in like the first couple of weeks of his tenure as deputy chief, I had a long conversation out in front of G Street Wonder Bar with the then deputy chief, just about all kinds of things. And so, yeah, he seems to be very open to that kind of dynamic. Did I feel like, no? Okay, oh, there we go. There was someone over here.
I will say that I've noticed that I do see Chief Henry about town very often. he was at the Treat Trail, and not just at like things, events that are happening. I do run into him talking to people out and about, and so I think that is happening.
Perfect, thank you.
Last call for additional questions, comments, topics we want to bring up.
I'm assuming you got our first groups of saying we're interested in his ideas about the Police Accountability Commission and relationships, and has he ever dealt with anything like this before?
No one has.
Right. Certainly not the Davis Police Accountability Commission. We're too unique. Any other, okay. All right, I think this is great. So this will hopefully, will, like I said, make our conversation a little bit more productive. Oh, also, one of the things, you were, Commissioner Sherman, you were mentioning if we could just get him going. One of the things I am glad about with Chief Henry is that he is more succinct of a speaker than his predecessor. And so I think that will sort of also make our conversations a little bit more productive. Let's see, item 7C, which is the appointment of our auditor review committee. And so we're doing this slightly ahead of schedule. Thankfully, I think we're always doing it slightly behind schedule, so I think we're just doing it on time this year. And so this would be the committee that would begin the work of the audit review for the, I guess, calendar year 2024. They'll meet with Mike and Stephen and talk, about, formulating that review. Of course, that, they can look back at the previous reviews that we've done over the, I think, past 5 times over the course of the years. Is anyone in particular either interested in being on that committee, and then also have thoughts about things that we should prioritize in that process? Either one of those two things. Don't all jump in at once.
Well, if we need a volunteer to, I'm interested in that.
Anyone else interested in being on the commission, or else have thoughts about what we should prioritize in that process?
I've done it the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it.
Right.
I want to give other people the opportunity.
I am actively working tomorrow to not be on this commission anymore. So I don't know if I should. I love this commission, but I don't know if I should take any commitments right now. Kelly.
I'm happy to work with a subcommittee of one if that's necessary. This is always the part of, a meeting where everybody becomes everybody becomes an astronomer.
Right.
You have one commissioner who's not here as well. We can
Right.
also check in with her and see if she's interested. I know she has been on the subcommittee in the past, occasionally. So
I've been on it the first 3 times, I think. If Cecilia is interested, great. If she's not, we'll be willing
So we'll have you as Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald's alternate.
to. I will be her alternate. I'll be her backup.
Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the auditor review? I'll just, again, take this opportunity to repeat what I said earlier in the conversation when we were in the audit report or audit update, excuse me, that I hope that we can figure out between all of us, the subcommittee that's going to be working on this, the full commission, Mike and Stephen, how we can sort of like step up our relationship in the way that we did, what was that? Now I'm not going to stop counting the years at this point, early in the commission's history. Any other comments, Kelly?
I would just say if something does come to you about the annual auditor review, if you would just send those thoughts to me directly, and then I can share them sort of anonymously with the subcommittee. So,
And,
so we can, bring this back next month or in January, as Chair Horton said, we're either ahead of schedule or right on schedule. I'm not sure which, but we're in a good place. We've got time.
yes, that was the next thing I was going to get to when to report back. But yes, either December or January would be fine. Other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Public comment on the appointment of the committee. All right, anything further from the commission? All right, going down to subcommittee updates. Anything from our outreach event subcommittee commissioners Canning, Griswold, and Sherman?
Sure. So we're right now in the process of reaching out to a number of different organizations we'd like to invite to be part of the event. And then we're gonna, the three of us are gonna meet up again later this month, talk about our progress, and then we'll go from there. Anything you two want to add?
No, just that we've met.
Right, yeah, that's good.
Yes, I think we said that last time, yeah.
You encapsulated it very well.
Thank you.
Is there a topic chosen? I mean,
A what?
a topic? Is there a title? I mean, when you're asking people to participate, what are you asking them to participate in?
Well, we're asking them to participate in an outreach event so that they would come and talk about the resources they provide for people who may have mental health crises, other kinds of crises, who don't want to call the police, or who feel uncomfortable calling the police, so that it's more of a community response rather than simply a police response to people's.
So we're keeping the original theme?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it sounds a bit like you're more limiting it though, which makes more sense to me if you're just staying with mental health versus all the different services we have in the community.
Well,
So
I
I didn't
mean,
know what exactly. what
Yeah,
you
I mean, mental health is
focused
one of
on,
the
so
topics, domestic violence is one, and, you know, if you've got homeless people on your block and, you know, you don't just want to call the police, which is people's, you know, knee-jerk reaction these days. Is there anybody else to call, that sort of thing?
community
Response.
crisis, or crisis response beyond the police or something.
Correct.
The title that we more or less came up with in our initial meeting was, "Who are you gonna call?" You know, it grabs just, you're all smiling. Hopefully it will grab the public,
Everybody
and
gets
some people will come to find out. You don't call the police for everything, but you have to know that there are other resources that are more appropriate. So it's informational, but in a hopefully presented in a pleasant, if a humorous title helps, fine, whatever it may turn out to be, to let people know that there are a wide variety of services, and it isn't always the police, but there are, and we can help define with the assistance of the police and their participation, will be helping to define when it is appropriate to call the police, and people will just be prepared, as they are actually in other phases of life. People don't call a dentist when they have a heart attack.
Thankfully.
So there is, you know, but we've learned the difference all of our lives. When it comes to the police, people don't, they know about the police and they know about the fire department, they know about the schools, but they don't know much else about what the city does or the county does and what services are being offered. And that's what we hope to do in this session, and hopefully present it in a somewhat entertaining way so that it will be a spoonful of sugar.
I very much look forward to the flyer, and I hope that there's going to be costumery involved.
Right.
Anything further on the outreach event? I thank our noble and learned subcommittee who's working on this. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess, did we do public comment on this? I'm always forgetting. No, any public comment on our outreach event? Let's see. Okay, moving on to long-range calendar. The only thing that I'll add here is something that actually Mike brought up in his report, is that we should probably, at some soon meeting, agendize a discussion about what our next audit topic should be. Anything beyond, any other agenda items for upcoming meetings? Any public, oh, go ahead.
What was the decision, or has there been a decision made on the surveillance project for next year as to whether we were going to get it in smaller pieces or one large piece again, or, because I don't know when we should start putting it on the calendar for, and maybe it's already on, but that was, I just know that that's been back and forth a bit.
So right now, it is still planned to come as one, not separate or parceled across the months. I believe it's on the long range to come to you in March. If it's the same schedule that you followed last year, so that you'd have April and then May, and then it goes to the council in June.
And we had hoped that we could change the reporting form a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that was something we had talked about. I don't think we made it formal.
No,
Well,
but if we
But
want to
here's
do
a
it.
question for the new chief. Would he like to, rather than have him have to have all that person power once a year, would he like to split it up? It's a chunk of work. I know it's a lot of boilerplate, but still, so it's something we can ask him when he comes.
But do we want a subcommittee to get on with how we like it reported to us? Because every time we get it, it's in that, and then when we finish, we say, but gee, if it had been this way, it would have been easier.
Yeah, if you want it reported differently to you, knowing that sooner rather than later would be
Well,
useful.
yeah,
Then we should put it on the agenda sooner.
There we go.
short range agenda.
Short range agenda.
Well, I'm just recalling.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of the items we sort of tossed around. So when you,
Often,
so when,
clearly.
Chair Horton, when you come up for, and Vice Chair Griswold, when you have your discussion about next month's or the month after agenda, this might be a good topic.
Yes, indeed. We have to do our own follow-up of our recommendations and advocacy
Well, yeah,
items.
I mean, we should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other items for future agendas? Any public comment on the long-range calendar? All right, taking it back to the commission, anything final? A motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
I second.
Anything further? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Record. Yes.